Welcome back. So today's episode is another part of a 3-part series. Values define your destiny, part 3. And this is about creating the life you desire. Now, you need to have listened to part 1 and 2 to have enough information to put this one into play, right? So if you haven't listened to part 1 and part 2, go back, listen to those first, and then come listen to this. Or just listen to this and do whatever the hell you want, because values define your destiny, and that's your value. And you want to listen to this today, and I don't care. So that's up to you. So let me return to my story. Now, if you remember my story, it started on Wall Street. I had a huge catharsis. It was hell for me to differentiate from values that were not my own. I did it. I went on a discovery path, and I started discovering who I am as a healer and this and that. Now, here's what happens next in my story. Over time, I discover who I am in my 20s. Like, I really get in touch with my values. That's clear. That happens for me. And I start to understand in my early 30s my hierarchy of values, meaning like what really makes me unique from other people and what's most important to me and what's least important to me of who I am as a being. And how I can, one, be fulfilled as an individual, so more of a narcissistic endeavor, and then more the altruistic endeavor is like how this uniqueness of my values can serve the world, right? The altruistic endeavor. Anybody that thinks they're only an altruist is lying to themselves, by the way, because the spiritual pursuit begins as a narcissistic endeavor because we're in pain, or we would never pursue anything to go to integration. We're coming from fragmentation. So this is just an important piece of understanding in this values conversation, that we always have self-serving and other-serving forms of our values, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. It's nice to have a balance of both, or else you're going to get feedback outside of yourself that you're focusing too much on yourself or you're focusing too much on others. You'll get that feedback. So back to my story is now in my 30s into early 40s. Now, I had a lot of different teachers and tools. I was in medicine churches in South America, a lot of different things that woke me up here. And my wake up was in my late 30s, early 40s, and I'm in my late 40s now. I had already created a very successful private practice. Things were going fine. And I started waking up to something else inside of me, that my expression of my values weren't sort of completed in the maintenance phase of my career, where I had this successful private practice, that I had other values in me that were screaming at me. And they were there the whole time. They were screaming at me. And I started waking up to recognizing that some of these values were not just to help individuals. It was to actually make an impact on communities, on nations, and global people in terms of helping people with this struggle that we've been facing probably as long as civilization. But I was realizing there was a value in me of like, I have to figure out a way to educate, because remember, education was a value of mine. So in my late 30s to early 40s, I started waking up to, I need to educate masses of people with tools that have helped me live a more fulfilled life and deal with mental health issues. And the type of mental health symptoms we face now are kind of crystallizing more intensely in a lot of people, differently than before, right? And I'm not saying that, hundreds of years ago, it was pretty globally on this planet. It actually wasn't. I mean, there was a lot of suffering for thousands of years in terms of starvation, the way we treat each other, violence against each other. It's been very harsh when you look at history. I'm not talking about that. And people's morality scales were very different, their ethos. We've evolved here. People live longer. They're healthier overall when you look at statistics. More people have access to food and water than ever before. Actually, people are treating each other better in certain ways than before. But our mental health isn't better. In fact, right now, there's a downward decline in mental health, right? So my value is to help somehow get education out to the masses. And that started rising me. Now, what I had to face in myself when that started rising in me, and I tried to fight that value in myself. I was like, I'm doing great. Like, I'm helping a lot of individuals here in my private practice. Like, that's just, what is that? Like, don't think about that. And because when I really came to listen to that, I realized like that's going to take even overcoming more to make that happen. And it scared me. But we all face this on any level. It doesn't matter whether you have a global vision or a local vision in your career. That doesn't matter. Moving through progressive stages of your vision for your life based on your values always takes risk. It always takes challenging yourself. And now let's talk about, well, how do you hack that system so you speed up the evolutionary curve in your lifetime around the manifestation of the form of your life, which is called life design, right? And this concept of manifestation, we see it in the self-help. Go walk in the self-help area of the bookstore. I've spent time there. I'm sure some of you have who are listening. Lots of books on manifestation there, but it's lacking this piece. And this piece is the practical piece of how do you take your vision for yourself, what's important to you, and turn it into action every day. Okay. Now, there are massive changes in the field of psychotherapy around this. Third wave behavior therapy is addressing this. Acceptance and commitment therapy is addressing this. I mean, one of the core principles of acceptance and commitment therapy is values-driven behavior. We interviewed Stephen Hayes a while back on this podcast, and he says somewhere that really this all boils down to like the fulfillment of a person it's boiling down to that they're living in accordance with their values. Many wise people in different traditions have said this. Okay. But how do you do it? So let's say you got through part 2 and you do know your values. Now, if you don't know your values, you got to go do some more stuff. I mean, we could go on about that for years, about all the things you can do to discover your values. Now, I gave you a little mini hack, but there's other things you could do there, obviously. But let's say you have a good sense of your values. And so now we have to talk about, well, how do you act on those values consistently? So the first real piece here is you got to take an inventory of your current life, right? You need an inventory. Now, what does that mean? What am I talking about here? What I'm talking about is look at your behaviors in a day. And you want to look at the two systems I talk about, the impulses, instinct, and values-based behavior systems that I talked about in part 2. Now, we need certain impulses, instinct, behavioral systems. In fact, mostly like things like brushing our teeth and not burning our hands on stoves and feeding ourselves when we're hungry. And a lot of these behaviors in the impulses, instinct, behavioral system are very healthy, adaptive behaviors for ourselves. But you need an inventory. Go through your day and try and list out all your behaviors in a day in a spreadsheet. And if you don't like spreadsheet, like I said before, go back to the journal. and write them out. Some people like to write. I don't, because I have all kinds of disorders related to reading and writing, and you should see my handwriting. I can't even read my own handwriting, so I don't even know what I wrote, so that wouldn't work for me. But some people love to write, and so you should do it that way if you love to write. But so list out your hundreds and hundreds of behaviors in a day. Now what you want to do is go through, and there's sort of three categories here you're looking for. One is the healthy, adaptive impulses, instinct behaviors. Second is the unhealthy, maladaptive, impulsive, instinct, pleasure principle-based behaviors. And you can find those. And this is not to create a shame loop in yourself. Okay, so you might be thinking right now, like, oh, well, that's not smart. Like, I do a lot of, let's talk about addiction, doing cocaine a lot during the day. Like, well, I'm just going to list that out and say they're not healthy. And well, that's not a good approach. So you might be saying that, or let's say that's with food for you. I mean, food has been that for me. I used to have drug addictions in my early 20s, but food, I can go there with food. And you might say, well, that's not okay. Like, don't ever list anything out like that and call them unhealthy. And you might be saying that. But the thing is if you can't take a critical inventory of what are healthy impulse instinct behavioral systems, what are unhealthy impulses instinct, you can't get to the next part, which is hacking your behavioral network. You can't do it. And if you want to go on an accelerated, crazy rocket ship to Mars and beyond path inside yourself of manifesting the vision inside yourself of who you're becoming based on your values, you got to be willing to do this. And it's not about shame. It's about taking a good look, sober look at what your behaviors are in a day. So you're looking at healthy, then unhealthy impulse instinct, and then your last list are values-based behaviors. Okay. Now, these behaviors are not so much about immediate pleasure, and it's not really that. Okay. These are like the deep values inside of you that drive you to doing these behaviors. And you would do these behaviors even if you didn't get pleasure in the moment. You would be able to put off short-term gratification for long-term gratification in some of these behaviors. You might be getting pleasure based on these behaviors. It's not that you are not getting pleasure. It's just that the reason you're doing the behavior isn't just for the pleasure, right? Okay. So that's values-based behavior. I have a lot of values-based behavior now in my life, a lot. But I'm not, not painting a picture of like, oh, that's all I do. I mean, it's never all you're going to do. That's not the point of this. So, but I have a lot. I have a lot with my family, spending time with my family and my daughter and my wife. And I have a lot with the way I operate at work and being efficient and the way I critically do things toward a goal in the organization, IPI. So you got to take a critical look. Okay. So let's say you've done that, right? Let's put that down for a second. You've done that. So now we're getting into a concept of creating the life you desire. So you know what you do in a day. And what we're wanting to do is not just rely on time alone to help us get more and more and more expression of our values in newer forms progressively over time. We're not just allowing time to do that, but we're actually going to actively lean into our behavioral output and hack those behaviors to create strategies in our behaviors. So there's more values-based behaviors in our day. There's more values-based behaviors in an hour, so that we are moving toward a vision of our future, and we're influencing as much control as we can in our situation that we have, that are in our life. Again, I want to keep saying that we all have different limitations, and some have a lot more than others. And this is going to be harder for some people based on the systems they're in or oppression. Some of this is going to be really, really, really fucking hard for people because they don't have a lot of opportunity with what behaviors they can go do. It doesn't mean we just throw that out and go, well, I'm in that situation. So now I should just say I will never have a meaningful life and I'm done. No, it means we take control of what we can, right? So now it's time to implement strategies toward your values. Now, this is a constant process. This is the thing that people don't get typically in some of the manifestation self-help movement, which is that, and you will see that successful people, influencers in the self-help movement, they're doing this. They're not just relying on manifestation happening to them. They might teach about some of that, but you will, if you go look at their behaviors, what you will see are lots and lots of behaviors in their day that are attached to values-based systems toward a vision for their future. So what we're talking about now is implementing and refining in a continual manner. It's a process where you keep refining and refining. It's very exciting because it's your values. So you might be saying to yourself, well, oh, that sounds well and good, but I'm going to be I don't want to live so rigidly. And, I don't want to make my life such an intense experiment and I'm more spontaneous, and that's fine. And if you're fulfilled in that, great. 2 thumbs up to you. But a lot of people aren't fulfilled because they're not seeing the evidence of their values coming true in an ever greater way over their lifetime. So it's a constant process of evaluating your current life and these behaviors, right? This evaluation chart you created. And then you're going, what do I need to shift? What new behaviors do I need to put into play? Now, this isn't like behaviors necessarily like brushing your teeth. That might be my behavior, but that I need to put into play. But this is not what I'm referring to. This is about getting strategic, and you're always updating this strategy. This isn't like a New Year's resolution where you come to, your values-driven thought process once a year for one day, for maybe 10 minutes, you set your resolutions and you're done. Not going to work. This is a process, and you're continually looking at yourself and refining your behaviors, and you're updating them. So what I like to do is I like to think of this on, long-term goals, whether it's 6 months, 3 months, a year, whatever, that's fine. But you have to keep checking in with the process continually. And then once you achieve that goal, or it's no longer valid to you, you reset and you set the new goals. So part of this process is first you come with yourself and you go, all right, what's the cycle I need to do right now? Is it a 3-month goal? Or if it's a bigger goal, maybe I'll list some 12 months goal, maybe I'll list some 2 years goals, 3 years goals, 5 years goals. You lay them all out based on your values of what's most important to you, not in the impulse and, instinct driven system. It's most important to you. You lay those out. Then you start going into what's here now, which is this week. What do I need to do this week? What don't I need to do this week to get a big step closer to that vision? And you go through your calendar, literally in a calendar, day by day, and you lay out your week. And maybe this is a career thing, and we're talking about career again. So you go back to the career thing in your calendar. What do I need to do from 9 to 10, 10 to 11, 11 to 12 to get me closer to being fulfilled in my values in this job I'm in? How am I going to get there? What am I doing? Where am I headed? What else do I need to do? If I'm transitioning one day, what's my next piece? Or if it's all there for you, you see the path there, you focus on that. What do I need to do first, second, third? And you lay it out. And not just career, right? Like, again, I've been mostly focused on this series in career, but you could do this about anything in your life: family, finances, spirituality, community, friends, anything. And you lay out your values based into behavioral strategies for long-term goals, and then you chunk them down into your calendar in a week. And you live your life this way. Okay. Now, again, you might be going, oh my God, that sounds rigid. I'm not doing that. Screw you, right? Well, that's fine. But if you're fulfilled, great. Then don't worry about it. But if you have some vision in you that's not being accomplished, and you're just going to go back to, well, I don't really, sounds rigid, I don't want to do that. That was me. I was this person, by the way. So when I like kind of speak in that voice, you're actually hearing the inner Keith voice talking out loud. That was me. I was like, I'm not doing it that way. I'm not living that way. That's rigid. I'm more spontaneous. That feels like a trap to me. That feels tight. That was me. I was that person. What I learned, coming back to my story, where I became the co-founder now of a very large organization where we are training now thousands of people around the world in tools, providers in tools that will impact hundreds of millions over time. If we train tens of thousands of providers, so if we get to 100,000 providers over time, which we can do now, we have a path there over, let's say, 20 years. You're talking about this could impact 100 million people getting these tools, the clients, right? Of the translation of the numbers of how many providers, how many clients see in a lifetime of providers, right? So this is how I think about strategy of my vision. And it's just because my vision has this thing of like, I want to have a global impact, right? Most people don't have a global vision. They have a local vision. And that local vision has to have a strategy. Okay. You could do this with finance. You could do this with career. You could do this family. You could do this with religion, spirituality. You come up with these goals that are values-driven goals. So these things are actually visions for your future. Now, you'll know they're not fantasies because A, you'll see that you're willing to delay gratification. B, you'll feel like they're going to come true. They may not, but you'll feel like they are because they're your values and you have worth in what's valuable to you to offer the world because it's who you are and it's what's most meaningful to you. So you feel the meaning inside of you and you'll feel that it'll mostly come true because you know that you have worth there to offer. So likely if you get strategic, it will come true to some degree. In maybe a little bit of different form than you see, but it'll come mostly true. So you chunk these things down again. And each week you go to the calendar and maybe do this once a day, but you start to think about your week. You start to think about your life in this way where you're strategizing your behavioral output. For some people, maybe it is too rigid to go down to the week and plan it. So I don't go to every single minute of the day. Like that's a little too much for me. But when you look at my week, my calendar's pretty full. When you look at my behaviors in a week, more and more progressively each year, you're going to see in my life more and more strategic behaviors toward the long-term vision that I have inside based on my values. And I see in my life, and others would see, the evidence is that they're coming true. So these are the hacks to do this. And I'm going to start to wind down here. The hacks around life design, around moving more and more behavioral output toward values-based behavior, less and less output towards impulse, instinct-based behavior that are, we could say, unhealthy. Trying to fill up more of that time and move those over. Those will still happen. Some of those that we might call unhealthy, like I can get a little stuck in social media sometimes, just like, looking in the reels and like some fool is jumping off of a diving board backwards and hits their head or something, right? Like I get stuck in those reels, right? And some of that can become unhealthy for me, like where I'm getting stuck in there, right? And so then sometimes I have to sort of reorient and remember like, wait, I'm spending too much time doing stuff like that. And if I start to see evidence that like I'm not living a values-based life, I'm going to feel less fulfilled, right? So I have to move back over. But this can get extreme. And again, when I was younger, it was more extreme in terms of spending unhealthy time and behaviors that were based in pleasure and reducing pain. And, a lot of trauma can really send us into those systems. It did for me, and it does for many. And we have to have compassion there for ourselves as we try and move toward a more growth-oriented mindset, a more values-based mindset. We have to have compassion for ourselves, because a lot of the reasons we are not in the more values-based action is because of trauma. All kinds of levels of trauma, depending on who you are. Cultural trauma, it could be systemic trauma, it could be individual trauma, it could be intergenerational trauma, it could be event-specific trauma. And trauma will take its toll. But we can, as an individual, we can remember the call from those higher self-actualized places in ourselves and hear it and listen deeply, that we can overcome these systems that are trying to give us a lot of pleasure because we're in so much pain. We can cut through that and work with the trauma and heal the trauma, or whatever's keeping us there, but a lot of it's trauma. We can work with that trauma and heal it. And at the same time that we're in that process, we can start to hack our lives, get in touch with who we are, and start to hack our behaviors and speed up, turn the volume knob up or I should say, turn the speed on the record player for those of you that are at least my age or older that have record players. Turn up the speed so that our evolutionary path in this world starts to get logarithmic, where we see our values translating to the behavior, translating into the results we want to see in our life. We're having the impact we want, and we're receiving the gifts from the universe that we want to experience. We can turn that speed up and work through these things. So I'm going to wrap up here. Thank you for listening to this 3-part series on values and, values defining your destiny. I had fun talking to you. I was talking to myself because it's a recording, but I had fun talking to myself. And I'm excited that, hopefully this helps some people out there to get more in touch with who you are and where you can fine tune where you might be incongruent with your values and get more congruent in your behavior of who you are and what you want to become. And that fine tuning never stops. This isn't I did it, I'm done. It's a fine tuning process over a lifetime, and it's a beautiful process, and it's a gift to take it on. And it's I hope that you can get something from that, as I have, and the teachers before me. I've taken a lot from that too. Thanks so much.